And we're back. Hello, friends and folks, for another another installment of the Creator Spotlight series. We're capping off this week, Devolver Week, with a really, really great game called Death's Door. I'm very excited. But first of all, I'm Carol Trang. I'm your host and program manager here at Unity, and this is my awesome co-host Hassan.
Sun, community manager here at Unity, also Twitch co-host. Happy to be here. Yesterday and the day before, we had some incredible streams. We spoke to Card Shark on Monday and then Boomerang X on Tuesday. And I'm so excited for today's stream.
Yeah, three very different games, three completely different approaches. So I think this is like the perfect way to end Devolver Week, honestly, because this game is highly anticipated. A lot of people have been talking about it. A lot of people have been talking about all the games we've been talking about, but there's just a lot of talking about games is what I'm trying to say.
Devolver is really bringing it this year, honestly. And we've been diving into the art style of these games as well, and all three of them look completely different. And it's just been fascinating to see the different approaches to developing these games.
Yeah, very excited to talk about it.
Absolutely. So right now, you may be joining us from Twitch, you may be joining us from Discord, or the Asset Store. If you're not joining us from the Asset Store, let's pull up my screen. Right now on the Asset Store, we have the Smash Hit Summer Sale, a 6-week sale. Each week is themed completely differently. Right now, we are on the Return to 3D sale. So we have a bunch of assets that can help you build out a 3D game you're trying to make. And so I'll talk about some of the assets right now. So you have assets like Vertex Motion. So this is an incredible asset that allows you to, if you need to quickly make your characters feel alive or anything in your game feel alive, it allows you to create vertex animation. So you don't need to add any bones or rig your characters. Just use vertex and soft body systems to bring your games to life. We also have the Crest Ocean system on sale right now. So, if you have a sea or any water in your game, we have this incredible ocean system for the HD render pipeline. All kinds of water effect. It's just so realistic looking, just incredible AAA style ocean system. Speaking of water, we also have interactable water, and this one is for the universal render pipeline. Works great for VR games. If you have your character in your 3D game at any point moving through water, as you can see from the video, like it's reactive, it's reflective, it's like everything you need for that. And let's just go back to the main sale page.
So links in chat.
Yeah,
so
we're putting the link in the chat for the sale.
Go check it out.
Yeah. all kinds of 3D assets. We've got like asset packs, Gothic ruins, castle kits. Just check it out. We're dropping the link in the chat. So with that, Carol is gonna introduce the today's show.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Death's Door, like I said, from Acid Nerve. I'm really excited to showcase the game to you, but let's cut really quickly to the trailer so you know what we're going to be taking a look at. Yay! Very exciting trailer. So as you see, July 20th is the date that you need to put on your calendar. Definitely go wishlist it now in the meantime on the Steam page. But let's introduce the team from Acid Nerve. David, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll kick it off to Mark.
Sure, I'm David. I am the composer and sound designer, as well as the producer, co-designer and level designer on the game.
Nice. Many titles there. Casually.
Yep.
Present team, that's what you get.
Nice. Thanks for being here. Mark, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark. I'm the programmer, co-designer, animator, and writer. It's sometimes hard to remember all the different little jobs you have to do.
Maybe sometimes social media manager as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. So tell us a little bit about Death's Door. Like, tell us about your team or how this all started.
Sure. Well, in terms of the team, we actually met quite a while ago now. We met just by coincidence in a queue to see a talk by Phil Fish just after Fez had come out. So going back quite a long way now.
Wow, yeah.
Mark invited me to some of the Manchester game dev community meetups because we were both from Manchester. And from there, we got into game jamming. And that's kind of where the core of our team's history came from, because we did one game jam called Leave Me Alone, which was this kind of cute 2D pixel art Metroidvania, which got picked up by a Flash game website. And that was our first commercial project as a team.
Yeah.
And then basically next game jam we did was Titan Souls, which was really our first big PC and console release that we made. And through that, we basically formed the company Acid Nerve. So that's the background.
Yeah, nice. I love that we've mentioned this several times, and Hassan and I talk about this whenever we do game jams or we play games from beginners and things like that. We're game jams are so important. That's the place where you go, even if you're a veteran, to just try to have a timeline, limit yourself, but produce something at the end of the day that you can show, and
meet
also
people.
meet people too.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Game jamming is pretty much the only answer I've got when people say, "Oh, how do I get into games and start making games?" It's the only that's how we got into it. We got into it through game jamming. So that's the best piece of advice I could give.
Yeah,
You just learn so much so fast. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to, you get forced to, don't you?
Yeah.
You have 2 days and you have to finish something, right? You can't so much of us work on projects and then leave them unfinished and go, "Oh, we'll get back to this later." But when you only have 2 days to wrap it up and show it off, it adds a different kind of pressure.
Yeah, nothing beats that.
A big skill in game development is and life in general is just managing to finish stuff. So that's a good thing about game jams is it forces you to finish it regardless of what state it's in.
Yeah. I love that you're saying you actually join meetups and stuff too. I feel super strongly about that as a community manager. I've worked in many tech and gaming industries, but I always tell people come to meetups. That's where you never know that person that you're gonna sit next to is gonna be your next teammate for the next 5 years. It's totally possible,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Nice. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the game itself? What your inspiration is, where it really started?
Yeah, so the inspirations and starting point were kind of a mix of a load of different places. We've said before, Zelda was one of the biggest inspirations, just that kind of format. We wanted to see what we could do with it, because we know obviously it's it's been done a lot by a lot of different people, but we just want to put our own spin on it and try it out. And then you've got the kind of Dark Souls elements to it, things about level design stuff in Dark Souls. I think we've learned a lot from playing that. And then visual stuff will be Ghibli movies, Spirited Away. And I was saying earlier, we the original idea for the game came from watching Howl's Moving Castle, because there's a door in that where he opens it and it goes to different places.
Yeah.
So the very first seed of the idea came from that.
Yeah, we love that. When we didn't actually know, I think Hassan mentioned it when we were talking earlier. It's man, there's some Studio Ghibli inspirations, and we all got so excited because I feel every generation now has been completely inspired by,
enamored by it.
Yeah, and Howl's Moving Castle is my favorite of all the films. So this game is very, very, feels very special, very nostalgic to me as well. But at the same time, really modernized. You're saying you were inspired by Zelda games and all these films, but this feels really nice really fresh. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and you can see some of that Ghibli inspiration in the character designs and stuff, but the environment and everything else, it's so unique and completely different. So it's just a really smart mix of inspirations to make your own unique thing. I love it.
Yeah, I'd say it's like this is probably, out of all the games we've done before, this is the first time we've really kind of had the most amount of fun with world building and actually coming up with characters and more of a direct story. So I feel like we've been able to take inspiration from a greater variety of sources compared to some of our past games like Titan Souls, which was much more like focused on one particular mood and one particular mechanic and kind of feeling. So yeah.
Nice. I think it's nice to have like one game under your belt, so then you can actually know how to prioritize certain things.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
Titan Souls was a good one to start with that kind of stuff because it was all just focused on that one idea, like it was a really stripped back thing. Whereas this game, we've kind of had more leeway to just do whatever we wanted.
Nice.
So it was good to have that under the belt already, so we kind of knew what we were getting into before we dived into like a multiple year project.
Right. So actually, is it safe to say that like because you already knew the technical limitations and that you've like passed them already and you worked them out, we'll deep dive into like how you're actually building out all this stuff. But because of that, you were able to really like give it some meat in terms of story and everything.
Yeah, I think we've managed to do quite a good job with scoping the game based on what we'd learned before in order to kind of maximize the impact of what we can do as a small team in the time frame that we wanted to work on it for. So yeah, it's definitely, I'm glad that this wasn't our first game and that this was something where, you know, we'd learned a fair amount and decided exactly how we wanted to build on our foundation.
Awesome.
I'd love to hear a bit about like, you know, wrapping Titan Souls up and then starting to work on this. So like, what was the time period between that? What was that journey like? Speak to that a little bit.
I'm going to have to dive back into my memory a bit because it was a while ago now. But after Titan Souls came out, I think we just took a bit of time off. Like we were lucky enough that it did well, so enough for us to like, you know, do that, like take some rest time, and then kind of just started prototyping new ideas and just trying out whatever you felt like doing. And then we actually made an iOS game in the downtime called Telepaint, and that was kind of my efforts to learn Unity at the time. So we made that and again managed to finish something which was cool. And yeah, just we started working on a few prototypes for the very original idea of Death's Door, which was it was actually called Death's Door and it had some similar themes in it, but it was very, very different to like what we've ended up with now. Like when we actually started, I think we tried it for like a few months or something. This was quite soon after Titan Souls actually, and then we just kind of maybe we were burnt out from like finishing that game or something, but we decided to just like kind of drop it for now and like come back to it later on when we're definitely ready to give it our all. So I think we stopped making it and then took a year to do other stuff. I think that was when we made Telepaint actually.
That's something. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, from that point, then we thought, well, let's keep thinking about it because we don't want to be jumping into this project until we really like know exactly what we want to do and we're really feeling it, because you definitely need that energy and enthusiasm early on in a project. Yeah. And then, we had a little bit of kind of a hiatus. I did a bit of freelance work, and I think Mark was traveling at the time, and he just sent me a kind of an expansion on some of our old prototypes where it was like the actual crow in the game and like some of like the kind of flashy combat that you see in Death's Door now. And that was the starting point when we were like, okay, I think we now that we've got this prototype, we've realized exactly what we want to make next.
And did you always know you wanted to jump to 3D from 2D? Because for those who don't know, Titan Souls was a 2D top-down game, and this is a 3D game with a little more of a perspective. Just wondering, was that something you knew you wanted to do, or did that come through prototyping?
I think that was like a natural kind of progression from where we were at before. Like, I think we wanted to move towards the 3D stuff because in Titan Souls, a lot of the actual bosses have 3D elements to them, and that game actually wasn't Unity. That was written from scratch in C++. with like OpenGL and stuff like that. Which after finishing that, that's when I was like, okay, I need to learn Unity. So that tells you all you need to know about that. But,
So not a recommended process then.
don't make your own game engine, guys. It's not a good idea.
Unity
You heard
tips.
it. You heard it here first.
That's a hashtag Unity tips for you right there. Don't make your
Yeah.
own engine.
From someone who's made that mistake already. I forgot what I was saying.
Oh, you were just talking about transition from 2D to 3D, and you had
Right, yeah. Yeah, because
Titan Souls.
in Titan Souls, like a lot of that was quite animation heavy for some things like the Yeti and stuff. Like we worked with an artist called Andrew Gleason on that, and he had to draw like loads of different frames for that, like for that boss where he had to rotate it for like 8 different angles. And I kept thinking, just like, I wish it was 3D because then I could just like rotate it and it would be done. The work's done.
Yeah.
So we definitely wanted to go in that direction, but we still like the kind of top-down angle.
Yeah.
Feel like that's a good way to interact with a video game.
Yeah, I think we've managed to get something now that's quite a nice blend of old and new. Because the gameplay itself is it has some things in common with Titan Souls, and it has some things that feel like more of that comfortable kind of SNES style game, but then combine it with modern elements and like something that makes it look like a game from 2021, hopefully. So I think we like that blend as well.
Yeah, but just to give some credit to Titan Souls, that I think that all that hard work of putting, like, rotating it with the different frames was part of the appeal, right? To see all that hard work, all that pixel art go into something, and to have so much detail in the animation. When I first saw Titan Souls, I was like, how did they do all of this? How did they animate this? This is incredible. But it's nice to see the transition. Sorry.
Yeah, even for this game, Hassan and I went the first time we saw it, we're like, wait, but yes, but no, how?
Yeah.
There was a lot of that going on when we were watching the trailers and stuff.
Then I heard it was 2 people. I was like, what?
Well, to be fair though, we do have 3 artists working on the game as well, doing the actual concept art and the modeling. But yeah, one of the things about transitioning to 3D was we had a lot to figure out in terms of the process, particularly because of animating 3D. Traditionally, more people are involved because you want someone to rig it and to animate it. But our process was quite heavily dependent on being able to iterate really quickly based on how we wanted the enemies to behave. So that was actually one of the things that Mark was doing on that hiatus. He was literally just learning, modeling and rigging an animation from scratch in order to be able to do it for this game.
Mark, you did a lot there in the past couple of years. Went from
I need to
making
boast on his behalf.
Yeah. He's playing really humble about this.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so we're already talking about how you've made this game. So let's actually jump into it, take a look at the gameplay, and then we'll break it down even further because I'm sure our chat's already asking tons of questions about how certain things are accomplished. So I'm keep your questions coming. I'm keeping them all on the side, and I'll definitely ask them as we get to those points.
We're gonna get an exclusive look at the first 10-15 minutes of the game. So let's uncut. Let's go.
Let's jump in. So I don't think this has been shown yet, right? Or has
Correct, yeah. So we've obviously we've put a couple of trailers out showing like a nice variety of different footage, but we thought it'd be cool to just show exactly how the game opened, like unedited, just to give you an idea of like the prologue of the game.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see this.
Nice.
And yeah, hopefully already you can see how this time around we have been putting more work into more direct storytelling. So there's actually characters that can speak to you, and like more world building where we actually have quite a lot of depth and detail in our own planning for the game in terms of like the world, how the world works, and everything like that. Whereas in our past games, it's more been kind of about the mystery and the atmosphere rather than the direct storytelling.
Chat is already very, very impressed. Sid Mike's already saying,
Blowing their mind.
pretty stoked for this, been waiting ever since the first announcement.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, and I love you can just see the storytelling in the environment as well. It's not just in the dialogue.
Yeah, this whole area actually, we were talking about having this kind of office where the crows actually work really early on, but I think from what I remember, it was originally kind of going to be a like something revealed later on in the game, like maybe even just a small Easter egg kind of thing. But the concepts that we got from our concept artist Fritz were just so good and so like thoughtful with so many cool different elements that I think Devolver immediately latched onto and thought, oh, that's really cool. Like, we really like that part of the game. And it just naturally became a more prominent part.
Yeah, I think you also, you mentioned that the Studio Ghibli and House Moving Castle, Spirited Away was your inspiration. I think the great thing about those years, and I think, Mark mentioned earlier, it's like there's a lot of depth to those stories. They're bright and beautiful, and they attract you because of their wonderful aesthetic, but it's quite dark, and there's really tons of different elements that you can play on that makes for really a great game.
Yeah, I think like Ghibli movies in particular have some kind of darker elements to them. There was like, I'm not sure if it's like completely accurate or not, but the Spirited Away movie had some kind of like similarities between like, because she like it was a little girl working in a bathhouse, and it's supposed to be kind of like a retelling of the story of like, like girls being sold into like slave labor and prostitution and stuff like that. But it's this cutesy, like lovely world and with magical creatures and stuff. And so it's kind of like an interesting like way that they blend those two things together.
Yeah.
And this game is kind of similar. It's not quite like that, but like it's kind of similar in the way that it kind of blends these dark themes about death and things like that into this cutesy kind of world.
Yeah.
With strange characters in it.
Yeah, I think that's something like as I grew up, as a young girl, I loved kind of like these more darker, morbid themes. So games like this really attract me, and yeah, highly aesthetic kind of things also very attractive.
Especially when it's when those messages are put in a package like this, it's easier to take it in and to get an idea for what's going on, right? So if it was just a somber, grim thing, then like you might not want to actually experience it, right? But
yeah, that's definitely my philosophy about it. I think you always need a balance, and it's more powerful if you can create a juxtaposition with like a variety of different feelings and themes.
Yeah. So what are we looking at right now? So
this is essentially the tutorial. We decided to just throw you straight into a boss fight, which it kicks off the story, and I feel like it's just a more exciting way of letting you learn the basic combat moves.
Yeah, it's just amazing.
I also like to
we
think
started like 2 minutes ago and we're already fighting a boss.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's the best part of a game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why wait around? Just get a boss.
Very fun.
I also think it's quite a nice way of giving you some confidence early on, just like throw you in at the deep end, and then once you've beat a boss, then hopefully you won't feel super intimidated by delving into the game.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to bring up. All the games that we featured this week for Devolver Week, they all talk about that, about like the level of skill required for the game, the level of satisfaction for the player, what do you let them learn for themselves, but what do you reward them with really early on so that they actually stay playing the game for more than like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. For us, we definitely, this time, we didn't want it to be as much of a hard wall as Titan Souls. We want it to be a bit more accessible and to give you more options than just try over and over and over again until you manage to finally overcome something. So
yeah, it's a lot less binary than Titan Souls was. It has a lot more of a grey area to it where you can do things to help yourself progress. And I don't think it's quite as hard as Titan Souls.
It's funny because Mark literally just mentioned before this that like Dark Souls was also an inspiration for this game, which is notoriously quite complex and
you pick and choose the things that you actually take into your own game though. Like Dark Souls is great. It's one of my favorite games, but there's some things about it that we wouldn't want to put into this. So like one of the things about Dark Souls that really kind of blew me away the first time I played it was the 3-dimensional space that they use for levels. Like everything's like stacked on top of each other in a way that's really cool when you find a shortcut. Like the first one of the first bonfires you find in Dark Souls, you after Firelink Shrine, there's like you go to the Hall Undead Parish and you beat this boss and you get right back to the place you were and you kick a ladder and it's like, oh wait, this is like where I've been running from. But
Yeah.
like I hadn't seen that before in a video game when I played that, and I was in my head, everything was just like a tunnel going from A to B.
Yes.
And to realize that I'd actually been walking in a circle kind of
Right.
like blew my mind a little bit.
Right.
So we've tried to take that kind of element into this game as well, which is a little bit tricky because because of the camera perspective, it's hard to kind of overlay these things on top of each other. So that was one of the challenges for level design, which we'll probably get into a bit more later on.
I love that moment right there, that with that bridge at the higher perspective, and then the creature moving across, maybe like teasing something that's gonna come later. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Again, on the theme of level design and world building and looping back around. I love that. Yeah, and we're gonna dive a bit more into the level design later in the show. We're gonna do a little deeper dive in editor behind the scenes into the level design. So stay tuned for that. That's gonna be super exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe that's kind of like the prologue of the game, so we could jump into showing off some art and that kind of thing.
Yeah, let's kick it over to Mark. We'll take a look inside behind the scenes how we make this.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I believe you have a test scene ready for us, Mark, to look at different effects that you're achieving in the game.
Yeah, so this is just like, I've tied it up a bit before
Right.
showing it off, but
Clean the
this
room,
is like
yeah.
the current test scene that we have, which has gone through, we've thrown everything at it over the past like few years. So usually it'll have like a bunch of different enemies and stuff in the background somewhere. You can probably see some like nonsense in the inspector.
I believe you said you had every item in the game in this one room.
Yeah, I deleted all those before the stream, so
Yeah.
we could like remove the spoilers a little bit.
Yeah,
Spoiler
the
free,
very
everyone.
last thing we did in this room was put all of the secret items just in a row. So definitely needed some cleanup.
Yeah.
Anyone who's worried in chat, don't worry. Spoiler-free stream. We're good.
Spoiler free.
Yeah.
What should we dive into first?
Yeah, I guess we're gonna look at the. I noticed when you're fighting, the attacks seemed like really juicy, and there's a lot of effects on the attacks. So maybe you can show us frame by frame how the attacks work and how you made it feel impactful.
Sure, yeah, I'll give that a go.
You can throw in a combat system, and if you're not thinking about it visually as well, it might not feel as impactful, right? But clearly in this game, it's so well done. So I'd love for you to walk us through that.
Yeah, so also for anyone wondering, there is like mouse and keyboard control in this game as well. So I'll be using that for this. So this guy here is just an enemy with his AI turned off, and he has like 999 health. So
Okay,
I probably won't be killing him today. But if I've got
you'll be hurting him.
some camera like tech in here, so I can just kind of freeze the game and like rotate for like debug stuff. So this was for us to make like nice images if you wanted to capture something for like social media or whatever. So you can rotate around and zoom in and stuff. And I can also just like get time to pass by one frame at a time. If I just press a button, it'll like tick the clock forward. Which is handy if you want to get like someone hitting a weapon in an exact position or something like that. If I hold this, I can like just play the game. So you can like this character here has got like a nice shader on it, which I might talk about a bit more later on. So if I can just like slash this guy and just pause it and then go over like what's happening. So I guess I'll start with just the sword attack. So the sword is like it's actually just a mesh. Maybe if I just look at it in the scene view.
Yeah, let's see that in scene view.
If I can click through the UI. No? There you go. So this is just, it's just like, you can see the orange outline there. It's just a pretty basic mesh. And then it's got a shader on it, which it's just like a dissolve shader with some stuff in this texture here. If you can see that, I can't really make it bigger here, but that has like stuff in the RGB channels which will give the information for like I think the red channel is the amount of dissolve that it has, which is like faded over a gradient as it goes across.
Okay.
And then the green channel is showing is used as like a cutoff between two colors. So we have like the edge here has this dark color, and then the middle has the main glowing pink color. So you can see that in game here, and that like that was originally it was just one glowing color, kind of like a lightsaber, but I added the green stuff, the green layer to it to give this extra effect around the edge, and that helped a lot with certain places where if you were on a lighter background, like here it's like quite bright yellow, but the light isn't too strong. But in some areas, if you've got a strong directional light on you, the glow was quite overpowering, so you wouldn't really be able to see the bounds of your slash, whereas these little gray lines around the edge help a lot with that. So that is the sorry.
So I'm wondering, is it one mesh for the entire swing, or are you swapping the mesh out, or is it one mesh per different like swing attack? How does it work?
So it's just one mesh for this swing, and then like there's a heavy attack, which is a different, very similar mesh but slightly bigger, and that also you can see has like another layer to it which has the white color on there as well.
Right. So the whole mesh pops in and then dissolves away.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
Nice.
it's just a pretty basic dissolve shader with a few extra little bits on it. So it's just like the distortion map has like just some generic noise on it that's just generated in Photoshop. And then I put a black and white gradient over the top of that and like multiplied it by that. So then that gives you the directional swipe. So you've got the direction with like some noise breaks in the middle to break it up a bit. And then the green layer on top gives you the edges. So it's pretty simple. I think like all of the effects in the game are actually pretty simple, but like when you stack them on top of each other, it gives like quite a nice feeling world. So yeah, that's the basics of the slash.
And what about when you hit the enemy?
Sure, yeah, that's the next one.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot going on here. So one thing that happens is like there's actually a wait frames thing, I call it, but it'll just like pause the game time for just a few frames basically. So maybe like 0.02 seconds or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think I plugged it in terms of frames, assuming like 60 frames a second. So it would be like 3 frames wait whenever you hit it. So that just gives you can't really tell that the game's stopping the time, but you can kind of feel it. It just gives you a little bit of a bite to it when you hit stuff. So
That's really clever, actually. I think that's like a very film kind of thing as well. Like to create that sense of like, like a very cinematic kind of approach to make the audience feel like a hit is actually happening. I think that's really clever.
Yeah. I think that's like one of the key things is like using like wait frames like that and screen shake and stuff like that.
Does it freeze everything in the scene? So like if there's a waterfall or any kind of a particle effect or other enemies, does everything freeze?
Yeah, it's literally setting the game time to 0 for a few frames.
So smart. That's really actually
cool.
yeah.
It's something that we have iterated on quite a lot, because I remember like for the first year and a half or so, then when you attacked, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think everything happens like instantly on the frame, and we were convinced it was great. But some people kind of give us some feedback like, oh, I'm not sure if there's as much impact as you're going for here. And then we did like a pass of that where the actual response from the enemy is like delayed by a frame, and that just gives you that feeling of connection more than when it all just happened immediately. So it's still all within a few frames, so it's really responsive, but just having that really slight delay makes it feel like you're slashing and then you hit, rather than just like everything happens at once.
Yeah, so the way that it'll detect a collision is just like doing like a sphere cast just in front of the player. And originally it was like, as soon as you click, it does it'll do the slash, and then it will immediately check everything. But what we did from that feedback was just add in like 0.1 or 0.2 second delay to that raycast check. So I'll try and pull it off and pause it here. But no, I couldn't do it. See, that's how quick it is.
Yeah.
But like, it's just a very, very small delay between like clicking the button and then having everything react afterwards. Because yeah, like David said, having it kind of instantly happen as soon as you click, it's in your head, in like principle, it seems like a good idea, but then when it comes down to the actual way it feels when you do a slash, it's not as good. It just feels a bit off for some reason, because it kind of feels like you're hitting before the animation plays out. So it makes sense that it's delayed like a little bit.
Right. Do you have a gizmo to show off the sphere cast, to show the range of that, the actual size of the hitbox, if that's something?
I think, yeah, if it's like this red
Oh
area
yeah.
here. I think that's it.
Okay.
But that will have been something I did 2+ years ago. So who knows what this could be anything.
Yeah. I would love to see a frame by frame when you hit the enemy flashes. I'd love to see that. Like
yeah, there's a lot going on in these.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like hit him a few times this way to get him away from the wall a bit. Because there's a few layers of animation and effects and stuff happening in here. You can see all the blood going everywhere as well.
Right.
So I'll try and just hit him and pause. Okay, I got it just before it
Perfect.
impacted. So here we go. I'll just step
Maybe we
through
can
that
go.
one. There you go. So okay, there's a few things going on here. So it will flash between a set of different colors, which I
Okay.
think I'm like swapping out the material with some global materials for flashes.
Yeah.
So it'll be like, I think like maybe white, then pure black, then back to like red or something like that, and then black, and then normal again. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. We will see in a minute, like
Oh, yeah.
the exact way it happens. But to be honest, I've just ripped that off Hyperlight Drifter, because like the way that like, when you hit stuff, like it's okay in game development to like take tiny pieces of things and
in
use it.
anything.
Yeah.
In any
Sure,
art.
because like the way that game handles like these impacts is one of the best I've like seen in the game, and
Yeah.
that's one of the heavy inspirations behind the combat of this game for sure. Like when people play it, they'll see like, oh yeah, you slash and you get charges back and things like that
Yeah.
for your ammo. So like the flashing on that was like a really interesting thing. So I've like studied how they did that and did something similar here, and it definitely feels quite good to me. Anyway,
Is that blood splatter a flat texture that faces the camera or something?
this is okay. Again, the scene view for this one. This is another dissolve shader, similar to the sword actually. So it's just like a bunch of spheres, I think. Yeah. So like 1, 2, 3. Just like a few different spheres stacked on top of each other.
Oh, they
And
kind of
these
blend.
just yeah, they're just like the standard kind of like dissolve thing.
Right.
You can see here like the texture that I'm using, which is like kind of like the sword, in that if you scroll over it, you just, you know, as time goes on, you just reduce a number, and it compares it with the cutoff shader to that number against the texture, and then you get this kind of effect. So if I just step through that frame by frame, you can kind of see that.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these spheres as well like get expanded, just normal scaling in Unity. So you can see it's moving. This one's moving away from the impact point. This one is doing the similar thing, but it's inside, so it gives you just a bit more depth to it.
Okay.
And then this one, I think, scales like outwards, kind of like a ring shape.
Are you applying a force to these and throwing them out, or is it a predefined trajectory?
I think these are just. This will just be like updated in the update thread. No physics or anything like that. It's just like over a set amount of time, they just move a certain distance and expand in a certain way, so they'll be consistent every single time.
Oh, nice.
So that's one layer to the blood, and then on top of that, you've got a load of particles which come off as well. And that's it. Bad part of my screenshot code is sometimes it'll just go off into the middle of nowhere.
Oh, got it.
So there we go, back again. So yeah, there's little blood particles here, which are just like some prefab game objects. They're just like spheres with like a trail on the back of them. You can see there. Find this one out.
Yeah.
So when they land on the floor, they interact with another particle thing, which just generates like a splash at the point where they land, and then creates a little splash effect there as well. So it's all relatively basic stuff, but it ends up like having a good impact on the way that everything feels when it's all put together.
And so, does it draw a decal at the end on the ground? Is that the final step?
They're just particles, actually.
Oh, really?
Let me just find where it is.
So Goliath in chat just mentioned that Hyperlight Drifter shares its own similarities with Titan Soul, so maybe the inspiration has come full circle.
Nice idea.
That's the thing. Like, if people get inspired by each other, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Everybody just
I'm not gonna
lift it up.
pretend that I think that Hyperlight Drifter is in any way inspired by Titan Souls, because I feel that would be pretty arrogant of me. But yeah, so this is just, there's got some code here that handles it, but like whenever those like blood particles land on the floor, they add something to it, like this decal pool script where it has like a maximum number of particles it can generate, but they're just standard Unity particle system, just putting them wherever they fall. So each room or each like area of the game has one of these scripts attached to it. So if you leave the room, all the old ones got turned off. Yeah. And going back to the slash stuff, like there's one more thing to like probably go over. It's just like these effects here. So there's like an impact there, right, with like just particles coming off like a standard Unity particle system, just some nice like kind of impact sparks. And then there's also like two other things, like this circle here. There's a circle here which is just kind of expands when things get impacted in the game. So this pretty much happens all over the place. Anytime there's an explosion, anytime anything gets punched or hit or slashed or whatever, it just kind of gives a bit more of like a feeling of something happening, and it's it's more of a noticeable thing, that the fact it's like a ring rather than just a slash or anything. So it kind of draws the eye a bit more. And then the last thing is this line here, which again is just another dissolve shader. So this has maybe a bit more going into it, so that it kind of appears in like a line and then disappears in the same direction. But it's just like dissolving in the same way that the sword slash line does. So they're pretty basic techniques, but if you mix them up and just reuse them in different ways, you'll find you can get things to go quite a long way.
So you're just stacking a bunch of effects on top of each other to make your own, like to make it its own thing, right? To make it look as
exactly.
Yeah.
I think the big like directional slash, that was my favorite one when it first went in. I feel like that really kind of brought it to the level that we wanted. Right. And it adds directionality as well, because you'll probably see in a sec, but if you fire an arrow in, it'll go like the direction of the arrow, and you can also do like an overhead rolling slash where you'll see it go straight down through the enemy as well. So I think that really enhances the combat.
That slash is also like very anime. I find.
Yeah, it's good to go a bit over the top.
Yeah,
there's also like some bomb explosions as well that just go like full Akira style anime.
Nice.
There's a bomb.
Akira for animation is just a great inspiration.
Definitely.
Yeah. The bomb explosion. Should I just switch that now and show that off as well?
Yeah.
Why not? Let's do that.
So I got like a debug menu with a load of stuff removed so that it doesn't spoil anything. But if I just give the bomb power. So like this, when it impacts, it like changes the post-processing shader on the screen. Maybe can I pause this? Okay, that I can't actually pause on, so you'll have to just like
that light was
watch
so
carefully
great.
or pause the video after or something. But like it just makes everything black and white, like increases the contrast massively, puts a light at the point of explosion, and then it puts a few cylinders around that cast shadows. So it just kind of gives that anime effect of like a black and white kind of big explosion.
That's amazing. Is there freeze frame there as well?
Yeah, there'll be freeze frames on it as well. Because like, the rule that I use is like, if the more of an impact something is, the more you would freeze the frame. So like a normal slash would be like maybe 2 or 3 frames of freezing, but like this would be a big moment. So these would freeze for a lot longer. You can kind of see it a bit better there. Maybe if I just hit this wall, it's easier to see. You can kind of see the lines of shadow like casting out as well. It's a bit of an empty scene, so you can't really. It's not the best one to show that one off, but so I'm hitting him to get my charges back, and then if I just throw it like through here, you can see it a lot better there.
So hitting the enemy charges up your bombs to throw, basically.
Yeah. So going back to that Hyperlight Drifter thing.
Yeah.
If you attack things, enemies in the game, or there'll be like certain things around the world that you can attack if we want you to have arrows in that position.
And can you show us the arrow? David was talking about that directional thing with the arrow and like seeing the line.
So when you slash, it has that like left and right, so that moves in the direction that you're slashing. And all it is just like it gets the normal of the collision and then rotates it to be tangent to that.
Okay.
And then for the arrow ones, it just takes the direction of the arrow to like impact. So if I pause this so you can see it, there you can see like
Yes.
the thing just
Cuts
moves
through.
through there.
That's so satisfying.
Yeah, that kind of just
It's the
dissolves
same-
in the same direction.
Same system, just applied differently for the different attacks.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Great. Is there anything else on the attacks that you think is you want to show us, or should we jump to the other shaders?
I think maybe just quickly show some of the same stuff with this, which is like
Oh, great.
this is let's say it, just a bad weapon. Oh, that's interesting. Because the game's unpaused, it's actually just turned his AI back on, which is quite funny.
So now it's a real fight.
So
Yeah.
you get to, well, it's a difficult fight because he has 999 HP. So I'm just gonna restart the game.
Jump back in. Well, while we're doing that, we have a question from Sid Make. What compelled the team to choose a crow as the main character?
I don't know where Mark first got the idea to put a crow into the game, but
Mhm.
I think the reason that we went with it is because it like crows are kind of morbid in that they're often associated with death, and they have this kind of like dark vibe. They're used in a lot of dark fantasy, but also like because they're birds, they are cute and funny. So we thought that's kind of the vibe that we want to have in the game. We want something that's dark and morbid, but also cute and funny. And the crow's just like the perfect kind of anchor point for that vibe.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, it never really occurred to me when we initially did it that people would go as like people would enjoy the fact you're a crow as much as they seem to, which is great. I can't really take credit for that being like a genius move or anything. It's just like,
Yeah.
those are cool. We should do
When we
that.
started the game 3
It's
years
just
ago, we
inherent
didn't know that
genius.
it would be Year of the Bird this year.
Yeah.
Another question from Epic McDude is a very technical question. Why is the player a separate scene, and how would you set something like that up? Maybe at least focus on the first part, which is why is the player a separate scene?
Yeah, so the player stuff. There's three scenes that are usually used, not including the don't destroy and load, but like the player scene just contains like the camera, the player, the UI stuff. So basically I could just put that all in one place and then everything is there. So I don't need to like add that in per scene or anything like that. You could do this in many ways. Like obviously game development is just, it's open-ended. You can do however you want, but like this is the way that I thought would be good. And it has its drawbacks and there's been issues with it, but like it has worked out okay for us.
Okay.
So yeah, this just has everything in one place. So if I need to change anything, it's just there. I don't need to go through every single scene and like change that.
Mhm.
But you could use like a prefab to load it in per scene or something like that as well.
Nice. Okay. So I guess we can jump back into the art and look at the umbrella weapon. You were going to show us.
Sure. If I actually switch the umbrella though, it's going to wake the mage up. But
Oh, I see.
that's fine. It's just more of the same stuff. So I just wanted to show the fact that like regardless of weapon, you can achieve like different things with the same kind of effects. So this is obviously like similar to the sword. It's just another like distortion slash, but it's not using any
Cool.
bloom or like glow on it because it's not the
little
same
more
kind of
grim.
weapon.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that completely changes the
Yeah,
feel.
100%.
Yeah, so this has a slightly different move as well. So you like kind of put your umbrella together and like do a thrusting attack with it. This is like a kind of a joke weapon, the same as like the spoon in Dark Souls. So if people want to give themselves an extra challenge, this is available in the first area, so you can play through the
nice.
game with it, and it does like it's basically the same as the sword except it does half damage.
Oh.
Watch the umbrella speed runs of this game that are gonna
Yeah.
happen. Umbrella only,
Exactly.
100%. Yeah, calling
Yeah.
it from now.
Do it,
Yeah,
chat. I want to see
That's what you want to
that.
see.
And I also
Um,
like that Mark went to the lengths, even though it's a joke weapon, of having it so that whenever you slash it, it's like a folded down umbrella. But then whenever you go idle, he'll
Opens
actually
back
Yeah. Love
It's all
that.
good. And a little detail I love is whenever you roll, you have this feather particle effect fly out of the crow, and it's just constantly shedding your feathers.
Yeah.
That's not quite. It's not very realistic in that regard.
No, but it looks
a
great.
naked crow.
Yeah, by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were gonna jump in and show us the shimmer shader. So there's a cool effect that you have on some of the characters. I'd love to.
Yeah. So this
see that.
mage is where that's going on. This is just lined up nicely. You can see here it's just kind of
Wow.
if I click his slashes. Yeah, it just got like kind of a load of distortion textures just mapping on top of each other. It's the same, like just rendered textures from Photoshop. I think they just look like clouds or something. So if I just unpause that and look at it in the scene view, it'd be easier.
Nice.
There's quite this shader has a lot going on. So its lighting is like toon lighting. So that's something else we could touch on as well. Like all the characters in the game have like a toon lighting style. So they've got like a really basic shader. So you just got the albedo texture here, and then a toon ramp here. So that's just taking the light value and then checking it against that toon ramp, and it just gives you a more binary kind of shadow to it, rather than it being like a proper diffuse fade or anything like that. So all the characters have that lighting, but then everything in the actual world is just the Unity standard shader. So it looks a bit more like more of a realistic kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, that's actually something that really surprised me earlier before this, when you told me that everything pretty much has a standard shader applied to it. But when you first look at it, you might not think that, right? But you've achieved a lot of the look through the textures and the way things are modeled, right?
Yeah, like a lot of stuff has. We generated textures using a program. What was that called, David?
I think it was
forget
3D Code.
Okay.
But the textures themselves are just really like, they are texture in the most literal sense. So there's no real like lighting information or normal maps or anything like that in in what the artists have created. But they're just put through a smart material system in 3D Code to give them a little bit of edge highlights for worn edges, just to give them a bit more 3D definition. But other than that, everything is in the mesh. Everything's all down to the 3D detail. And I think that's a big part of the art style.
Great.
Yeah, so you can see here, like the edges of these polygons have like the detail for this texturing, which just gives it that extra kind of like worn look. But that's the main thing we're using throughout the game for all the environment stuff. We're just reapplying this technique everywhere.
And that's
I think
automatically generated.
I think the fact that it is so such a different approach to the characters with a toon shader is quite a big factor in what makes the game have its own unique art style, and also it helps it be more readable as well, because there's such a separation between characters and environment, but in a way which hopefully still feels cohesive and not just a mismatch. So I think it's worked out quite nicely.
Nice.
The toon shader actually started with the idea of the crow design itself, because our concept artist wanted it to have it so that the crow has arms, but when it's idle, the arms kind of blend into its feathers, so it just looks like a normal bird when it's idle. And in order to achieve that, then it needs to be like, you don't want to have lighting information on the 3D shape of the crow. You just want it to be inky black. So that's kind of where the toon shader idea originated.
Right. So it just blends and looks like one object there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the crows in the game actually have a slightly different variation on the toon shader, where we can mask off certain stuff so that it doesn't get any lighting information, so we can have completely pure black, which is quite a nice contrast to like be able to always kind of know where the player is, because the world's usually quite a nice bright place, especially in action and things like that. And that is something that can sometimes be an issue in games where, for me anyway, I want to be able to like read everything and like parse everything on the screen like instantly, and being able to know where the player is just like a major part of that. So you've got the really dark color of the player is always usually quite noticeable, and then you've got like a silhouette shader which shows you behind stuff as well. And whenever you're attacking, the big bloom on the weapon usually like helps you as well. So those things should help it be like accessible to more people in terms of like finding where they are in the midst of the chaos.
Right. And I'm sure you'll get to points in the game where there's a lot, like where there are hordes of enemies, and you're more likely to lose lose track, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The chaotic gameplay is definitely it's much better to have everything. You be aware of everything that's going on, so that you're not just kind of getting frustrated by the chaos, but you're actually trying to learn to manage the scenario.
Yes. Navigating through it.
Yeah.
I noticed when we were doing our earlier gameplay run, there were some like portals and doors shooting out a light and shooting out like an animated cookie, I guess. I was wondering if you could show us, if that's something you're going to show us in this scene, like the way you pulled off the animated cookies for the lighting.
Let me just think about that. I haven't actually prepped that one.
Well, if we go into the graveyard scene, then you'd be able to teleport over to that part of it. Yeah.
Remind me, Epic McDude asked another question, and I actually forgot if you had told us, but is this the built-in pipeline or?
Yeah, this is just the built-in stuff. This is using Unity 2019. You can see, I think, can you see at the top on the stream? Yeah. So you can see the version we're using there. The reason for that is just that's like we were using that when we made it, and at a certain point we had to kind of just lock it in.
Yeah.
A few years ago, so we haven't like had a chance to play with any of the fancy new kind of Unity features or anything. So this doesn't have shader graph either.
Oh.
So I'm looking forward to one day being able to do that.
to play in shader graph. Yeah. Next project.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is it's rendering. It's got a spotlight on this door which has a cookie, and the cookie and the actual door itself just share the same texture. So it's just rendering to one texture with like some kind of distortion, like a sine wave going up and down between these 2 points, where it's like the how do you say it, the more dissolved point and then the less dissolved point, and it just kind of fluctuates between those, and it just renders that as a cookie on the light as well as being the door itself. So it's like a 1-to-1 match.
Yeah. I love how it creates this illusion that the door is actually casting the light on the floor, but they're just two different things that are actually in sync because they're using the same texture. And I just think that's fascinating.
Like one problem with that is because of the light coming from behind the door, you can see my crow's shadow is being cast through the door, which makes no sense. But you've got to allow some things to like not be perfect.
Yeah. And I believe there is another scene you were gonna take us through, the forest scene, where you're gonna show a different way you achieved the lighting, cookies, and texture.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think lighting is really interesting in this game. Really early on, somebody had asked, like, are you using volumetric light or faked using fog?
Oh, we're not using any like fog or anything. God, which light is it? Everything we use is relatively basic. There's no volumetric light or anything going on. The lighting in this scene, which you'll see in a second, is using a generated cookie, which has a few weird like things going on with it to make it feel a bit more alive. Just find the right light.
Oh, great.
Do that one. Here we go. So it's got like this script here, just is generating like a cookie for the light to use. So we'll just get this shader material. Sorry, not shader. Come on. So this is it's kind of hard to kind of explain what it's doing. A lot of this is kind of just the way that I would normally make things is just constantly add things to a shader to try and get an effect. Like if I don't have a solid plan, I'll just keep hammering away at it until it eventually does what I want it to do, or vaguely close to that. So the way this is working is taking in one texture that has like a basic shape to it, and then a second texture which has a few things in the RGB channels which distort it based on certain percentages. So like around the it might be kind of difficult to see, but it's one of those things that you can kind of feel as you're playing through the game. But like around the edges of these kind of like parts of what would be like leaves overhead, and they're kind of like the lights coming through them down onto the ground. I wanted it to feel like the leaves were kind of moving around a little bit. And before I'd made this shader, the only thing I could really do was just move them around, or maybe have two things stacked on top of each other and like kind of shift them around like on top of each other with two separate textures. So doing this let it kind of manipulate it on a more like a level that is more like how leaves would maybe move, and casting shadow in that way. So they're kind of, you can just about see how it's like kind of moving the edges of stuff, and all that is just like these RGB channels. I just kind of took the original texture and then drew over it where I think it would move more. So like maybe, I can't remember off the top of my head, but like the red maybe was the distance it would move in the x-axis or something like that, and the strength that gets applied to it. So those things could be like just overlapped on top of each other to give it this kind of effect.
So these are like, smart solutions, but they're also highly optimized, right? Like instead of using actual lighting to achieve this.
Yeah, if you're using actual lighting with like shadow casters overhead, it's probably it probably might be a lot less efficient, and probably a lot more time consuming as well, like having to place things in a way that would give you like the kind of effect you want. And with this cookie, you can add like little touches that your artist can add in. So like here, you can kind of see the shape of a skull, which is just kind of part of that cookie. Like
that's amazing.
Like maybe something that people would notice, or maybe they would kind of just again feel it in the background.
That's great. So you might wonder, like, is that accidental or is that actually a skull? Little touches. See, I love those kinds of details. It just shows the amount of love that's put into the game. A lot, like love and attention. It's so great.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I think chat was like immediately like, oh my gosh, there's so many lights. How is this performance? So like,
yes,
this is easy trick.
Yeah,
yes.
this
one light.
Yeah, I think one of the things we found with lighting as well was that the game became so enhanced through the use of cookies to create contrast. Because I think the Lost Cemetery scene that we were looking at before, originally we just had like a straight up bright light, but then when we added the rolling clouds overhead, we like mess with it so that the light is actually really bright, but then there's contrast all the time because you've got the dark patches from clouds. And from that moment, everything just felt a lot more kind of luxurious and like a more fully developed feel.
So speaking of that contrast, we got a good question from the chat saying, from D-Dane, how much iteration was there on the color palette? I can imagine it being difficult to find that perfect balance of monochrome and bright colors.
Yeah, colors.
I think for most scenes, we just had really strong concepts, and we were always trying to match the concepts. Although that said, we did put in this scene in particular, we put loads of work into it because we wanted it to have this desaturated look to give you an introduction to this bleak world. But the first pass of it was way too monotone, and then we realized that colors that you might not necessarily expect to see, like more greens and blues, even though they're quite subtle, they really gave it the look that we wanted it to have.
So I think that it's been great to look at the art in the game. I'd love to talk a bit more about the game design and the differences between your previous project and this one, the difference between Titan Souls and Death's Door. Maybe we can cut to some B-roll while we talk about that, some B-roll of the game. And yeah, so I'm just one thing, for anybody who hasn't played Titan Souls is more of a boss rush game, right? There's a focus on fighting bosses, and you just jump from boss to boss. There's a few environments, but it's not to this extent where you're actually navigating a world, fighting NPCs and hordes of enemies before you fight these big. You still have those big bosses. I think that's the trademark of your studio right now. These like fun, cool, big boss fights. But I'd love to, if you talk more to that jump, right? So, fleshing out the world, fleshing out the gameplay, what made you choose to do that and what that experience was like.
Yeah, I think Titan Souls was very much a game all about its limitations, and that forced us to be really creative with our approach to everything. We had to design a bunch of bosses, and we had to put so much thought into their behavior. Because for anyone who doesn't know, everything in Titan Souls dies in one hit. So it got us kind of being creative of our game design, thinking a lot about action design and enemy behavior. But Death's Door really is a exercise in taking what we learn and the feeling of that action, but applying it to a much more developed world with, I think in particular, just more variety and more choice for what the player can be doing in the world. So it's not just walk to the boss fight, die when you try and fight the boss, try and fight the boss again until you eventually beat it. There's a lot of different things that you'll be doing while playing through the game. So that's probably the core of it.
And I guess the moving from this to that, you also had to start thinking a lot more about level design, right? So you mentioned you did research with Dark Souls. Is there anything anywhere else you looked to start working on level design? Any other inspirations you took from? How did you did the level design go through different phases of prototypes? How was that?
So for level design, interestingly enough, I ended up doing most of it, and I'm not quite as big of a Dark Souls guy as Mark, but I had Mark over my shoulder, kind of instructing me in these, making these intricate levels with all these shortcuts and stuff like that. I think my inspirations for level design were probably more Nintendo games. I think in particular, Link Between Worlds, the 3DS Zelda, was just one of my favorites, and I just thought that was a really cool world map for getting secrets and multiple layers of exploration. I just remember playing it, and there's a bit where it has this whole gimmick where you can merge with the wall and walk along walls, and I just found this new spot where I could do it, and I was like, hang on, I can keep going down this way. And I found this entire new route through loads of old level, where it's this entirely different route on top of places I've already been. So that was a huge inspiration for the kind of multi-layered approach to level design and exploration.
Nice. It's safe to say there'll be a few secrets to find here and there.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think that's a good segue to jumping right into the. You're gonna give us a little behind the scenes to the environments and the level design. So
yeah,
let's jump to David's screen.
Maybe actually, if we can do it on Mark's because he's got Unity open with the graveyard, and then I'll just I can talk us through what our process was.
Great.
I think our focus with level design was a couple of things. As we mentioned before, we want these interconnected levels, Dark Souls inspired, where there's several routes through, and there's frequent moments where they will meet back. So you'll be exploring through the level, and you'll see somewhere that you were before, and sometimes you'll unlock a shortcut to that part of the level. And then on top of that, then we also wanted the whole world to feel handcrafted and memorable, so that as you play, you will be making this map in your head, and you'll be learning the structure of the environment. So we don't want you to be just walking through corridors that all look the same and using your mini maps to figure out where to go. We want you to really feel like you're exploring and getting to know the level.
Is there a mini map?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
So yeah, our workflow was it heavily used the tool ProBuilder, which was super useful for loads of reasons. First of all, just in terms of the broad structure and figuring out how these levels are going to function as a complete level, in the sense of having these routes which kind of circle back on themselves and link shortcuts. First step would be to do just a really rough block out using ProBuilder. And I think that's the kind of thing that you could do on pen and paper as well, but the benefit of doing it with a 3D tool in the engine is that you know everything that you're making is actually spatially consistent, and you know that the parts where it loops back on itself are actually going to work out how you want them to. So an example of that, this is really textbook, but if you remember the bridge from when we saw the game before, and the NPC you saw as you walked under the bridge at the start of the level, you saw the NPC walk over the bridge. One of the very first things that we knew in this level was that much later on in the level, you're going to walk over that bridge and you're going to look down and think, oh, that's where I came into the level. Now I know where I am. And I'm actually making this kind of map in my head of this, of the layout of this area, which previously felt like, might have felt daunting, but now I'm starting to actually understand it all. So yeah, definitely a lot is involved in that. And then also on a more zoomed in level, then just figuring out in terms of each individual like screen space of the game to make sure that everything is aesthetically pleasing and also works well with the mechanics of what you want to be happening in that part of the game. So my process would be to kind of figure out what would roughly fit on a screen in game and make sure that you have a good amount of variation in the verticality and variation in kind of the shapes, structures that you see at any given moment, and also anchor points so that you have a sense of where you are. You don't want to just be walking through like a sparse, empty desert because you just won't know where you are anymore.
You lose a sense of direction.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say that all of what I've spoke about so far is all something that we would do in the Pro Builder blockout phase before we start putting any 3D assets into it, which is really good because that 3D stage, obviously that's where you need to start paying people to make your concepts and models. But it's also, for us, it was really the most time-consuming part of constructing levels to make them really detailed. And you don't want to be doing that until you know from your Pro Builder blockout that your level is exactly how you want it to be.
Okay, that's fascinating. So you would block it out all in Pro Builder, play the game, throw in the enemies, make sure it's fully playable, and then the final step would be hiring people to actually do the final art and just replacing the Pro Builder assets.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So you would play it and you would often get a sense of, like, there's certain things you just don't know until you play them in the game, like, oh, this walkway is a little bit too narrow for the amount of enemies here. I need to just widen it a little bit. And having Pro Builder in Engine means that we can just really easily tweak that on the fly.
Yeah.
And then, so we would end up with this blockout and we could, in a way, we could use that as a foundation for our concept artist, and they would take that block out and create a paint over. And that's how our environmental concept art would come about. So Fritz would be able to just like take a screen of the game, which had a good examples of the kind of assets we would need, like architectural elements, rocks, detail, and some things just for aesthetics. Nice. Draw all over our Pro Builder, and then we would just collaboratively figure out exactly what modules to get modeled and then start adding them to the scene. And for like, you could just do it so that you completely replace all the Pro Builder, but we actually still use Pro Builder for the floors in the game because we want everything to be perfectly flat for the way that the action works. So we basically just kind of like, exactly, because we're still using the Pro Builder colliders for most of the level colliders. So
things have to be perfectly synced up and aligned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So interesting that earlier in the chat somebody mentioned, why is it so? Why is there showing so much on screen, or why did you choose that specific like camera angle? And although I think it's quite trendy right now to have this kind of top-down isometric view, there's actually a very strong stylistic choice here. Like you said, there's a lot of, I think we see this a lot, Hassan and I, when we're playing through game jam games, people's first iteration of games, is like how much you reveal through text versus what's on screen is really important. Hassan pointed out that like scene at the beginning and you pointed it out again. But I think this is the way you did it is like a really great way for us to reveal information about the game. And also it's subconscious, right? Like you didn't see it, but your brain did. And again, very cinematic approach to building a game.
Absolutely. I'm wondering with the Pro Builder models, because you need things to be lined up perfectly. Do you export the Pro Builder meshes out of Unity into like another 3D program, and then the modelers will use that Pro Builder mesh and build around that, or how do you line things up?
Sometimes we did that. Yeah, like for things like the main office that you saw earlier, because that's such like a it's all about the broad shape of it. It's not something that we would want to construct ourselves. Like the modeler needs to do that. So I think, if I remember correctly, we use the blockout as an exported model to use as the foundation for the office. But for a level like the graveyard, then because I was doing the blockout and also putting the assets in, then it's we just would take a screenshot of the Pro Builder blockout and draw over it for the concept, and then I would just start putting the modules in.
Okay, and when you say draw over it, what does that process look like?
Just the concept artist would use that as a screenshot, and then
literally draw. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to come up with what will flesh out the world and what to add to these levels to take them from something that's purely mechanical to something that is like a proper world.
Okay. Is there any chance we can turn off some of the layers so we can see the Pro Builder beneath?
Yeah, if you take a look in the editor now, if I just turn off these level chunks, that kind of leaves you with pretty much just mainly the Pro Builder elements that are underneath everything.
Great. Yeah. So this is all Pro Builder right now.
Try playing the game and you can be able to see it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is an approximation of what the blockout phase would look like, with some differences in that some of the walls we've deleted, obviously, because we don't want them to actually be active in the game. And this has like more attention to detail put into this vertex painting, where you can see the the textures blending to the moss on the ground. But yeah, this gives you an idea of how simplistic the levels would start.
It'll probably be even more simple than this as well when they're like first being grey box. It's the standard Pro Builder texture and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might not have all the textures applied and all the effects and the.
And you can see here we use these like David just mentioned, vertex painting. So we have like materials that blend between two textures with a certain with some parameters to them. So you get like a grass here and like just a path here, which I think are probably like the same texture but with different colors on or something. And then it has like at the point where they meet, it does something else to give it a little bit more, a little bit more of a color change there as well. And again, that's using some kind of noise texture to like decide how it blends between those two things. And so what we do is like in Pro Builder, we could then just like set each vertex to have a specific color. So if it was completely white, that's just the basic color. So like whatever the first texture is in the material, and then we made it red because we're using the red channel for this. It would be fully the second texture, and then anywhere between the two would be that level of blend. So we can give it like different we can move the vertices around to change how they flow, or give them different strengths to make them like blend slower, or over more distance than other stuff. Like you can see here, like the edge is a bit thicker there, so there's probably more of a blend between those two bits. So we can make it feel a bit more like natural. And you can just kind of like see the structure underneath everything, like you just toggle between the two.
Oh, that's incredible. That's so good to see.
Wow. Both are beautiful, but wow, like with everything, it's really.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And then some modeled elements like this bridge are outside of these chunk layers I'm turning off because they're like core, structure that you want to stand on. So we can't really turn those off.
So there are textures applied to the actual Pro Builder meshes, right? So the Pro Builder meshes are actually there in the final game. It's not like they're invisible and you're just using their colliders. You're actually applying textures to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the floor that you're standing on in the game is still Pro Builder. We just kind of use it as a basis and build upon it with the assets. Nice.
And those textures were probably applied in the other program and then brought back in.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's great. I think it's great for the communities to see this actual like process, like from beginning to in a finished product, right? It's so insightful.
Yeah. Hopefully. I mean, I know that nothing that I'm talking about is probably super like amazingly clever or anything, but hopefully just to show how like we've used this simple process to actually manage to finish this game. So yeah.
No,
yeah, to actually see it.
Yeah, I think it's actually much better. Like I think we see this really often when people start, and because both Hassan and I like talk a lot with the community who are just starting with Unity, they always think that it has to be this. Everything that you see in games is this big, fancy, highly complexly coded thing. And it's really just people working within their limitations, timelines, and their skill sets, and just being really prioritizing well and having a keen eye for design, right? So
Yeah, definitely. I think if there's one thing that I'm really proud of that we've done, it's that we've kind of used the scope that we had to efficiently manage to make something that we're proud of. I think one good example of that potentially that Mark might be able to show now is how the post-processing affects the look of the game.
Sure. Yeah.
Love to see that.
Great
We have
idea.
one question from chat. Did chunk loading have a large effect on scoping level design?
I mean, it's kind of one of the things that's an advantage of having a top-down camera like this is that you will. There's no way you'll ever see what's going on like far off the screen. So we're able to we're pretty much completely flexible. We just have a grid of like 9 chunks that are always active, and the one you're in is obviously the center one, and then all the ones around you will be activated. So it was actually something that we were able to implement after designing the levels. It's not something that really influenced us from the start.
We had another question earlier, but we can go after you show us the post-processing. But Epic McDude wants to know, how do you handle combat collisions? We probably should have asked it earlier when you were showing everything, but does the weapon have a trigger collider? Is it collision-based with mesh collider on the weapon? Or do you instantiate a box collider via animation event during the attack animation? A little bit of a complex question.
I think it's just physics sphere overlap. Just like that's it. So just one raycast when the slash happens. Like I said, it was delayed after the slash animation. Then it just does a raycast in a sphere around that area, and then if whatever's in there, it just sends a signal to like, if this is a damageable object, send the damage signal from its position.
All right. So nothing
Nice.
too
Yeah.
complicated. Great.
Yeah.
That's our philosophy. Just keep everything as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let it finish
If
a
it
game.
works, why overcomplicate it? So you're gonna show us the post-processing now, correct?
Yeah, I guess I
Okay,
can just
let's
go
see.
through these and like tick them on and off. So,
Yeah.
like a core thing is bloom, because like that obviously doesn't look much different. But now if I do a slash, you can tell the bloom definitely adds a lot to it, and it's not actually that expensive to use either. So I'd recommend popping that in if you want to have that kind of glow effect for sure. And you've got like vignette layer, which just adds a little bit of something around the edge. I think we use that in a few different places. Like when you get low health, I'd make that red, and it kind of pulses in and out a little bit, just to give you a bit more of a feeling of like danger. Like when we were testing, we found some players didn't realize when they're on low health and they died, and like, oh crap, like didn't think about it. So maybe when we introduce the like red flashing thing, it makes you a bit more aware of what's going on. So you're gonna try and play a little bit more carefully. And then you've got depth of field. If I can just get into a position where you can really see this. Like depth of field is a weird one because it is a top-down game. So you might think like, what is that going to do? But there are a few instances. I'll just debug over here. Like you can see there, the depth of field kind of has like quite a nice effect on the background. And one thing with this kind of isometric view, which I should also say isn't purely isometric, it's actually a really far away camera with a very narrow field of view. So you can see like stuff around the edge of the screen, like here, around the edge of the bridge here. You can see it parallaxing, like moving in a normal 3D way, but it's like only quite slight. Whereas with a lot of 3D games from this angle, if it's not purely isometric, you would see it move a lot more because it's more realistic. But that gives it kind of more of a stylized look. So yeah, the depth of field kind of like helps with this isometric element to it. So because sometimes you can't really, it might be a bit tricky to kind of see where you are in terms of the y-axis, like as the player. So you want to shoot something that's on the same height as you, but then the thing you're looking at, because of the depth of field in the background, it would stand out a bit more. So you could kind of get more of a feeling of where you are in vertical space. So that's why we rolled with that.
So you're almost faking the isometric look here, right? With that camera.
Oh yeah, it's like a fake isometric. Yeah, so it's just really zoomed away with a very narrow field of view. I don't think there's a load of code controlling it, so I can't really easily turn it off to show you what else I would. Just going through more of these again. Chromatic aberration isn't actually doing anything for the most part, but like in some instances it will get turned on. Like when one of the bosses fires a big laser, it just like a really powerful chromatic aberration. It kind of gives you a real feeling of like claustrophobia and like something, energetic is happening on screen. And then grain is just another layer on top, which you might not be able to tell too much.
Maybe not on a
4K.
screen, yeah.
Yeah, and definitely not on stream. Yeah, that's a good
Subtle.
point. Yeah, it gives like a nice, just like it just like muddies things up a bit, because sometimes if you've got like, say you have one clear color on a texture, it can just kind of break it up a bit more, and it just kind of makes everything on the screen have this unifying layer to it, which helps with some things. And the final thing I'll do is color grading. This is like a magic button. When I turn this on, it just makes everything look amazing. Like that's without color grading. It just looks horrible.
Color grading,
You can see,
secret
like,
ingredients
the-
into everything in games and movies.
Like the pink of the sword there, that's the actual color of the sword. But when you add on these like different layers, like bloom there, you can see it's really that garish kind of pink with the color grading. Like
It's
changes
just
that.
so beautiful.
Wow, that is
Incredible.
amazing.
I'm wondering Oh, do you want to walk us through the? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's not really much going on. It's
Yeah.
literally just this ACES thing, which I think is used in films as well. And then the post exposure, which just gives it a bit of a boost to the lighting.
Yeah, that's great.
So those things.
I'm wondering about the lighting setup. So when you go to lighting, is there any indirect lighting that's being applied, lighting from a skybox, or is it just fully shut down and then you have lighting in scene?
It's generally like just one directional light per scene. In some scenes, we use point lights, like in some smaller indoor rooms, because it gives more of a kind of a cozy feel. But it's quite situational. And then there's a few spots where you have lights like this, which do add something else to the scene. But we try to not go too overboard with lighting.
Right.
But yeah, it's mainly
we do a lot of messing about with like the color of the light versus the color of the ambient light as well. Like there's so many different iterations that we've been through to try and achieve like a nice color scheme for each level.
Yeah,
Okay, so
definitely
this changes per level. This lighting setup here changes per level. That's okay.
Yeah, it's the same setup normally, but just different ambient light color and different main light color and direction and intensity.
And do you ever change it in the middle of a level? Did you ever play with those settings halfway through a level?
We didn't really go down that route. No, it was mainly just we just kind of set it up the way we wanted it, and then that would be it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I think this is
possibly there is some instances where you would in some collectibles it would like drop the lighting in the scene because there's like a big animation plays and like some things glow and stuff like that. So dropping kind of the ambient light in the scene makes it have more of an impact when that happens. But there's not like the kind of thing where you would go between two areas and it would change the lighting to match a new kind of part of the scene, except for maybe when you go into, we have like rooms. So in here, the lighting will probably be different to outside. So this has its own directional light in here. And then maybe this one actually doesn't have, I can't see any shadows in this one. But like the outdoor one will just be like kind of sunlight type of thing, as indoor ones will have their own like unique light source as well.
And we have a question by Harry Alyssa Vakis. Are you using forward or deferred rendering? And I'll add a little question on top of that. Are you using dynamic or baked lighting on top of that?
It's set up for deferred rendering. Although I think forward would do similar stuff. To be honest, I'm not really entirely sure like how those two things would affect the game, but we definitely started out with deferred and like went without the entire time. What was the second part as well? Dynamic lighting.
Dynamic or baked lighting, and is there like a mix of the two being used, or is that one or the other?
There's no baking going on, so it's just like lights put where they are, and that's it. There's no like shadow maps or light maps or anything like that baked in. It's just we just put it in, and again, just going for the simplest thing for us to make. Just put it in, it works. There you go. That's it.
Great. Did you ever run
just one shadow casting light at a time per scene?
Yeah. Try not to use multiple shadow casters because that will have a performance impact, especially on consoles.
I see. Okay, so you can have multiple lights, but just fewer shadow casters. Is what's going on in the scene at one time.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Thanks for the question, Harry, who's also one of our leaders in our community in VFX and jittergraphs, actually. So thanks for the question. I think that's it for the questions. Can you guys take a break now, or like until July 20th? Do you have anything to wrap up? Would you actually get to like? I think you were saying you were twiddling your thumbs now until the end.
We're almost at twiddling our thumbs point. We have finalized the game, so it's done. But we're still finalizing some of the special edition content that we've got up for the special edition. It comes with a soundtrack and an art book, but it is pretty much done now. So yeah, I think probably next week we will just be twiddling our thumbs and waiting for launch day. But hopefully it's worth the wait.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for the two of you. This is so exciting. I'm going to buy this on launch and already have it wishlist. Everybody, please remember to wishlist this game. We're going to drop the link in the chat again.
Yep. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming by. For the both of you, I think you showed us so many awesome tips and tricks for our community, actually. We knew a lot about the game before because we've talked to you previously, but I think our community learned a lot today. I'm super excited to share this. If you missed the stream, don't worry, it's going to be available on demand. We'll also be sharing on YouTube later, so you'll have all your content on the ready. Make sure, like I said, to wishlist the game. It's releasing on July 20th. Please show them a ton of support by following all their social media. Very excited for this game. This wraps up our developer week for the Creator Spotlight series. The Creator Spotlight series is going on all summer long. So every week we're going to bring in tons of your favorite Made with Unity creators from tons of publishers like Annapurna, Devolver. We're going to have a whole week dedicated to indies, although, you know, at Unity, we love all the indies. So, but so excited that everyone came this week. Let us know what you thought of this series, if you enjoyed it, if you want more content like this. We are super happy to bring this content to you. But yeah, thank you so much for coming, and thanks a lot, guys. Like,
stick around as we raid another Twitch stream.
Yep, we're gonna raid. Looks like we're gonna raid Lana. But yeah, thank you so much, David and Mark. I hope you enjoyed coming on the stream today.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Have a good time.
So.
See ya.